You know what? I almost debated not doing this game just because it's not really a shock anymore. Seeing City drop points in games where they wouldn't have before. Brentford are a good team. We know how hard they can be to beat at home. But when you're 2-0 up with about 10 minutes to go, when you're a team at the level that City are, that should result in 3 points. And it's not the first time they've let a two-goal lead slip either. And, I just feel like there's the chance I might be repeating myself here. But I feel like there's maybe a bit of added reason to be speaking about it because they are looking like they're going spend happy in January. Two centre back signing, and I can't remember their names off the top of my head. They're difficult names to pronounce, so I'm not going to risk it without having prior knowledge. Omar Marmoush coming in as the rotation striker option. Andrea Cambiaso's had reported interest, which I think is an unbelievable signing if they can pull that off. There's rumours they'll go in for a midfielder before the time the window's done. So 5 January transfer signings. It's quite a lot. I mean that shows that there's problems. That shows that Pep has realised that he needs to address something and address something in a big way. And we'll figure out all those issues as we talk about this game. And we'll go over Brentford's attacking phase first, out of respect to them being the home team. The Brentford would look to build up in a 2-4-4/2-4-1-3, with either Damsgaard or Visser dropping in a little bit deeper in between City's defence and midfield as sort of false nines, with Lewis Potter and Mbeumo providing the width high and wide. Lewis Potter coming up from left back to provide it on the left hand side, or you get Damsgaard sitting as the sole attacking midfielder with the Visser looking to use his pace and quality to get him behind that City defence as quick as possible and try and stretch him as much as he possibly can. Jensen would move into Lewis Potter's left back position to cover around there. Janel and Norgard as the two pivots, Rorslev and Collins and Vandenberg as you were. And City would sit in a sort of 4-2-4. They'd look to try and block central progression for Brentford with a very narrow shape and would start on the two pivots. They wouldn't be stuck to the centre backs immediately. Foden and Savinho would be tucked in quite a lot. And as a result, you'd see Rorslev and Jensen pushing up a little bit higher, almost to the point where they're in line with the City midfield too, for reasons we'll discuss in a second. And what this did give is that if Flecken tried to play the ball to one of his two centre backs, he didn't throw himself over there, he passed the ball there, that would have been quite interesting to see. Is you'd sometimes get the out to in run of Foden or Savinho on whichever side it was progressed to, blocking the ball into the fullback to press the centre back and force him back, going from out to hit in. That would be a trigger to go press. You'd also sometimes get De Bruyne if maybe Savinho's start position was a little bit deeper, going from Norgard to Collins, and you get the press being backed up by either Bernardo Silva or Kovacic, sometimes even both if both had gone to press and the two centre backs were being occupied. Maybe Haaland found himself a little bit further up, or Flecken was providing too much of an option in build up, so it could turn into a 4-4-2 as opposed to a 4-2-4. This would obviously leave a lot of space in between the defence and midfield, that if Brentford could find that ball through to Damsgaard, he could turn and get playing with the three who all have exceptional pace for Brentford, getting in behind that City shape. This is definitely a clear issue to why Rodri is missed, because his defensive awareness and his positioning would solve this issue. He wouldn't get pulled too quickly into the press. He'd manage to block off the lane by just staying in between the two and picking his moments to press wisely, which he's fantastic at. So City could go into a 4-4-2, but mostly remain within their 4-2-4 shape. But either way, it did cause some issues for them. One would be Brentford are a team that are very capable of going direct, as I was just speaking about. They have fantastic direct options with that front three, great pace to get in behind. But with the shape of City, Flecken being left on the ball for periods could look to find this pass into the fullback, chipping over the City press and then get them on the ball and playing. The only issue is sometimes Flecken's passing was a little bit inaccurate, not by much, but just enough where it's a little bit of a difficult ball to control for either Rorslev or Jensen to take it under control, and City can recover in, or maybe Gavardiol or Nunez on either fullback position can get out to him. So that was an issue, but they did have the chance to progress down that way. And if they did get control of the ball in either of these positions with Rorslev or Jensen, and having Jensen in the fullback area is key for a lot of reasons, because it gives Lewis Potter then the option to go forward and use his pace to great effect in behind that City line, who would look to squeeze up the pitch high. And Jensen can get on the ball in these areas and use his really good passing ability to find that pass in behind, find the run of Whistle, or even try and spread it to the other side to find Mbeumo. And on the odd occasion that Visser and Damsgaard came in narrow, or came in deep rather, and created a bit of an issue for that back line, you then see Mbermo coming out from his wide position in between Ake and Gvardiol and look for that run that almost Visser was looking for, dragging Gvardiol in, narrowing up that City shape. Jensen still trying to find that pass over the top, or Ruslev could then overlap on the right hand side and find that pass in space if it could be played to him. So they could manipulate that situation really well for themselves, Brentford, and find space to attack. Another way they could is if the ball was found to the Brentford fullbacks quick enough and City had overcommitted to the press, then you could find this with Mbermo either inside or Visser on the inside, making movements, trying to get in behind. That could force that City defence a little bit deeper. And again, another issue with the lack of Rodri in this team is that defence dropping in, Kovacic or Silva not really having that defensive mindset, that discipline and reading of situations to get back into position quick enough. That pass could be fired into the centre to Damsgaard, who had a little bit of time and space in the middle of the pitch, where he could start playing balls in behind and finding those direct runs. And City's backline really struggled sort of maintaining their line of squeezing up, of dropping in. They were caused all sorts of problems, and that's just the consequence of not having a top-level holding midfielder in your team. And even if the ball wasn't played in behind into that sense and it was given to Mbermo and he could look to attack Gvardiol one-on-one, he did it really well. Gvardiol struggled with his one-on-one defending a lot this year, a lot. People calling this guy the best left-back in the league need to watch him, in my opinion, because he gets a lot of praise. He ends up at the top of a lot of YouTubers' top left back lists. Not for me. Doesn't defend one-on-one at all well enough. Doesn't read long balls over. Decent last ditch, recovers in well, but I always think if your main quality is a last-ditch challenge, that's probably because you've gone wrong elsewhere. So Mbermo could attack him one-on-one, create from this area, play it inside to Damsgaard, or the run of Norgard, who would look to try and get forward as Brentford would speed up their attack in these deeper areas, with Rorslev offering the overlap as well. Savinho would do a good job of tracking in, to be fair, and covering that. You'd get the recovery of the likes of Silva and De Bruyne to try and reduce space in this area for Brentford, but Foden and Haaland could be caught up the field a little bit sometimes. City shape could end up going a bit 4-4-2. And even that midfield three tracking in don't have the legs to cover those runs from the likes of Norgard and Damsgaard and Jensen, maybe coming a bit further up from his left back position. Norgard making a brilliant run to get into the box in the last minutes, in the dying minutes, to win his team a point. Just shows the commitment and the energy and the belief they have in what they're trying to pull off. And Ake and Akanji just really didn't manage those situations well enough. They played with pace and physicality, but they didn't display it here. And to be fair to Brentford, in either half, it was approached really well. They were happy being slow, happy being methodical, happy being patient in their own half, building out to try and draw City in. But then once they got the ball into the City half, quick, direct, hit him in behind, overload with runs from deep from the players I was just mentioning. Rorslev and Norgard especially contribute to that excellently. Visser getting in the box as well, really good finish. And as a result, City end up conceding 2 goals late on. Poor from them. But how did they approach the game from an attacking point of view? We'll go over that now. City built up in a sort of lopsided 3-2-5. Akanji and Ake would split either side of the box. Gvardiol moving up into a left-back position with Bernardo Silva and Kovacic providing the double pivot. Matthias Nunes would move high and wide into a sort of faux right-wing role. He'd look to get up the pitch really quickly. Foden in the half space as well as De Bruyne, Haaland and Savinho. Brentford man-to-man aggressive, which is a complete contrast to how they ended up defending once City pushed them back, which we'll talk about in a second. But it just goes to show how impressive this is from Thomas Frank to pull off what he's pulled off throughout his tenure at Brentford, how tactically versatile they are. I think it's incredible the way he's set his team up and the understanding the players have of what he's implementing as well. Damsgaard pressing onto Akanji, Visser onto Ake, and Burma onto Gvardiol, with Norgard and Yanel pressing onto the double pivots. Jensen would follow Nunes back into that right wing position, again pulling off his sort of centre mid left back hybrid role. It gave Lewis Potter more freedom to push onto Foden. Vandenberg would be left on Haaland, with Collins looking to engage De Bruyne, as De Bruyne could look to drop in with Rorslev left on Savinho. And the reason that De Bruyne could become an option and that Collins, who had a bit of a dual role really, and it was important that he stuck to it well for many reasons. So the positioning of Silva and Kovacic would look to try and maybe create space through Norgard and Yanel, who would look to stick to their man-marking duties well, press high onto him. And so they had to almost create space for the likes of maybe Foden to drop into these areas here to receive the ball off of their marker if they just dropped a yard or two deep very quickly and could turn and play. Again, Lewis Potter stuck to his role really well. Collins, however, had a bit more of a more difficult one to have to plan around. So let's just say if Ortega could turn and play this ball into De Bruyne, Collins had to manage the space between De Bruyne and Haaland well. So if he could get close to De Bruyne, press him, and win the ball back quickly, he would get real aggressive up against him and force a turnover. If not, or maybe if he felt like he couldn't get close to De Bruyne in time in terms of doing anything about him winning the ball and progressing it, then he would look to quickly drop in, double up on Haaland with Vandenberg, so that if De Bruyne could turn and play, he didn't have that easy pass into Haaland to quickly transition City up the pitch. He had a lot to do, Collins, to be stuck between Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne. That's pretty difficult. That's not a job that anyone in world football wants. He did it as best as he possibly could, and it involved a lot of decision making. And all it takes is one decision which you've not even gotten wrong. You're just maybe half a second slow to reacting, and you're done. But them doing that meant that, and it wasn't even if just De Bruyne received the ball, it would be if De Bruyne presented for the ball and he was a free man. Collins then had to weigh that up against coming to press him, but staying deep enough that he could react, that if he came too close to De Bruyne, Ortega would fire that ball up the pitch into the space that maybe his movement upwards could create. And he'd have to get back in quickly to again assist Vandenberg in stopping Haaland being that transitional threat. They did it really well. And it did get City up the pitch. It wasn't just him, to be fair. It was all their transitional threats. Savinho as well, who had a really good game, I thought. So that press could be beaten, as always, with one-on-one and man-to-man pressing. Takes one player just not doing their job, and then it becomes a bit of a domino effect of players then having to react to the free man. But they were aggressive, and City couldn't get a lot of clean moments of playing out. They would have to go direct a lot just through the nature of Brentford's press. And this is where it gets interesting, because when City did push Brentford back, this would be the shape. I know what you're thinking looking at this shape. This is very deep. And indeed it was in the game. Brentford dropped so deep, allowing so much space for City to move up the field. I mean, they were pretty much camped within their own third of the pitch, or a quarter almost, if we're going to go American football about it. And as much as it brought pressure on, they did their jobs fairly well. And that would be with, again, just complete congestion of those central areas and that entire width of the pitch to prevent City from playing through. Couldn't really pull off any bits of close combination play in the attacking midfield positions because of how close Brentford were to them. It meant that Ake was essentially the free man. If the pass went to Akanji or Gvardiol, who again could push very high up in these areas because of how deep Brentford were, but Burmo and Damsgaard would react to him and look to press him. Then maybe the pass could go to Kovacic, who could maybe look to drive forward from that deeper position. Visser would follow him in as well and do a really good job. And Silva had a lot more freedom to move into that attacking midfield area of the pitch. And it would mean Silva, Foden, and De Bruyne would contest with Norgard, Janel, and Jensen. They would man mark him pretty heavily, try and go man for man in that area. Lewis Potter would be left on Nunes on the right wing position, Rorslev on Savinho. And they would leave a bit of space between themselves and their centre back, and that would be because Vandenberg and Collins were doubling up on Haaland to make sure he didn't get that sight of goal from those deeper areas where they could play through. They just kept either side of him pretty well protected and didn't really have much to offer Haaland. But if the ball went to the wide areas and Rorslev and Lewis Potter were given a lot of freedom to come in and press these players down and get close to them, then they had to be wary of those half-space runs that City attacking midfielders make. And this is where Nurgaard, Janel and Jensen were fantastic in covering that space between centre-back and full-back, preventing the option for those players to run into that and receive the ball deeper in these areas where they could provide cutbacks, balls into the box. They did so well, dropping in to make it a back six at points if they needed to. The City's rotations as well, with Silva, Foden and De Bruyne, they're all capable of coming into any part of that midfield position, and they would stick to their marking jobs fantastically, defend those half spaces like their life depended on it, and full credit to them. Excellent defensive discipline. Visser dropping in when Kovacic would look to drive forward, Gvardiol and Akanji offering those short options, and Burmo and Damsgaard would move in fantastically. Really good defensively disciplined performance from Brentford in this scenario. The only real times that City connected with any real quality to create clear chances, whereas you'd sometimes get Savinho coming inside if he couldn't progress down the left with his unbelievable dribbling ability, and De Bruyne could find the ball out wide, who could take it on his right and left foot. He's such a two-way threat and play some beautiful crosses into the box. He's obviously on the decline with his age, but he's still one of the best in the world. When you see some of the ways he can play a pass or a cross, it's unbelievable. Also, having this deeper base meant City could come up the pitch more, and when they won the ball back, they could use Mbermo to break Visser, making powerful runs from deep and find a lot of space and have an easier time beating the offside trap because of how far City were inside the Brentford half. So they could have a yard or two or 5 or 10 in behind their markers and still remain onside because of it. And I'd say it was a game plan that was pulled off really well. And at points, it did become a bit of a basketball match between these two sides. A lot of it was played on transition, quite a lot, because of the way that they can go man to man and the way that while being forced into that direct threat, they're both capable of pulling it off with their own assets and tools in the team to really capitalize on it. It suits the underdog a bit more when it's a basketball match because the top team are usually the ones that demand the most control, and you take that control away from them and you're seeing them struggling to react and deal with the game and manage it more effectively, which is what ended up happening with City, in my opinion. And as a result, Brentford get a last-minute equaliser, capping off a fantastic performance. And City, just a real lack of attacking quality at points in those areas outside of Savinho and De Bruyne. Foden got his 2 goals, but I did think he was quite quiet in the game, just made movements in the right space at the right time when needed to. But other than that, Nunes, I feel from a little bit because it's not his position, and if there can be Cambiasso rumours to be believed, he's going to thrive in this system. What a signing that could be for City! I think as well having the likes of Marmoush as an option to come into this area of the pitch, who's great as a two-way threat in terms of his technical quality, receiving in tight spaces and evading markers to then making movements in behind, could be a valuable asset. Again, signings are obviously going to help improve the City team, and as well, they'll probably help them to defensively transition better. But that's still assuming they settle in and it all goes well, which isn't always the case, especially with January signings. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment down below, tell me why either way, and subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.